Hi, welcome to the training webinar for this week. Today is going to be kind of a weird one because we're not going to do much how-to, if any, at all today. What we're going to talk about is best practices to both run a Process Director installation as an administrator and also some of the best practices you should think about when we get into designing forms or process timelines or what have you. This is going to be all over the place because whenever you have Process Director, there's usually a couple of different things going on. First of all, what's your deployment type? Are you on-premise or are you on the cloud? If you're on-premise, you have control over some things that cloud customers don't. Also, are we talking about a development server or are we talking about a staging or production server? Production is going to be a little different than a dev or stage server, largely because you're going to have some different users on that server. You're going to have different administrators. Administrators are going to be set up differently on a production server as opposed to a dev server. Permissions are going to be much stricter. The environments should be the same in terms of the content list structure, but we'll get into that. But because we've got two different types of deployment models where people may be able to do some things on one model and not on the other, and licensing comes into this as well. There are some things where if you are a cloud or an on-premise subscription customer, you're going to have access to some things that someone who is still on the old legacy tiered licensing model is not going to have. So there's that as well. I also seem to have moved my camera slightly. Well, see, now that I've done that, we can see part of the room behind me. So I have to maintain the illusion by moving my green screen a little bit. There we go. Now I'm happy. I'm in the middle of the screen, if nothing else. So anyway, like I said, this is going to be all over the place because we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different stuff that will probably apply to you, but there are going to be things here at the margin that may not apply to you as a cloud customer, or that may not apply to you as an on-premise customer, and that may not apply to your licensing. So it does get confusing, but I think most of what we're going to talk about is going to be universal and it's going to be equally applicable to everything, but we're going to cover a lot of subjects in the time that we have allotted to us today. So let's start off by pretending that we have just installed Process Director, which I know is not true for you, but these are things to think about, and we're going to start with just sort of the basics and move on from there. So let's talk about your system configuration right from the start. On a default install of Process Director, you're not going to have much in terms of configurable objects. If you're an on-premise customer, your partition is going to be pretty empty. You're not going to have pretty much anything here. You are going to have to do a couple of things right off the bat. One of which you need to do on a recurring basis, and that is to grab the custom tasks off of the support site and install them. Now, I believe for cloud customers, we install the custom tasks for you, so you have them right from the beginning. But beyond that, we're not going to go back and periodically reinstall them. Custom tasks are weird because they're not part of the product technically. And indeed, each custom task is its own little software product. Each custom task has its own version number. Generally, changes to the product don't really affect the custom tasks at all. That's not completely true. There have been times, I believe, going to any of the 6.1.300 versions required an update to the custom task because we changed some stuff in the background in the product. So some of the calls that a few of the custom tasks made no longer worked. So if you are going to upgrade the product, it's probably a good idea to upgrade the custom tasks as well. If you're not going to upgrade the product, it's also a good idea to periodically upgrade the custom tasks. A couple of weeks ago, I got a tech support ticket from somebody that said, hey, this custom task just isn't working anymore and I can't figure out. We didn't make any changes. And as it turned out, no, they indeed had not made any changes because they had not updated this particular custom task since 2016. So they were using a very, very old version of the custom task. And it worked right up until they switched to, .3xx, whichever version of .300 they were on. And then they noticed, well, this custom task doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work, but you also hadn't upgraded the custom task for 9 years. So that's a long time to be running with the same custom tasks. So that's one of the first things that you're going to do whenever you install Process Director. Let's go back to where I was initially, though, which is the system configuration, and take a look at the workspaces. When you first get Process Director installed, you're going to have two workspaces, User Profile and Admin Profile. Admin Profile is fine to use for administrators. That's pretty much the profile I use all the time when I'm working on my own Process Director server. Well, this one, actually. So Admin Profile is fine. User Profile is this super generic sample profile that we create just to have a user profile, and we throw a couple of things on the user profile, a couple of knowledge views, and I have completely changed this one, I think, so it doesn't even show you the 4 panes anymore. So I don't even remember what the original user profile looks like. I'd have to go find a machine with a vanilla install. The thing is, it's not really a user profile, and it's not really designed for real world use. The admin profile will be fine for you as an administrator. It'll probably have most of the things that you want, although I find that the default version of the admin profile still isn't great because it does not contain a link to the data flow analyzer. And I like having the data flow analyzer because it's not such a big deal now when I run a business value, because I can always test the business value and get the first 100 rows back. So I don't need to use it for business values anymore. But for other instances, like for example, I might have a form that calls several different business values. It's really great to be able to go in the data flow analyzer, look at that form, and just check to be sure if something is going wrong. I can always check to be sure, okay, well, am I getting all the data back that I should? Because I can go to the form is going to show me what calls were made, or data calls were made from that form, and it's going to give me the first 10 records or so of the call that was made. So I can kind of see what data my form is bringing back. Used to use it for business values as well because we didn't see any of the rows, any of the values that were returned in business values. We've changed that, so now that they do. So the data flow analyzer has become somewhat less useful because that tended to be the lion's share of what I used it for, was business values. In any event, I always add that to the admin profile. It's not part of the admin profile on a default system. So that leaves us with, what do we do with all of our users and what profiles do we have? What I would suggest that you do is that you create either a copy of the user profile, where you can do that. You can just copy a selected workspace by selecting a workspace and copying it, and then customizing that user profile copy that you make so that you have a nice generic workspace that everybody can see. And that's one of the important things. You do need to have one workspace, however it is that you'd like to have it configured, as your default workspace for all users. And in my case, it happens to be the user profile workspace. I wouldn't recommend that. Although there's really no problem. I mean, you don't really have to copy this workspace and edit the copy. You can feel free to edit the user profile workspace. I mean, it's just a workspace. It doesn't have any special sauce to it. There's nothing you have to worry about breaking. But however you do it, you do need to have one default workspace, which is to say the workspace that every new user gets added to whenever they get a Process Director account. Because what you don't want is to add a user who aren't a member of any workspace generally from the beginning. And if they were to open up Process Director after you created their account, they'd basically just see an error screen that says, hey, you're not assigned to any workspaces, so I'm not going to show you anything. So the entire, bottom portion of the screen here would be blank. That's not good. So you do need to have some sort of default workspace that all new users get added to. Some things that you might want to throw into a workspace like that might be things that every usually we talk in terms of employees, although for many of you, you don't have all that many employees, but you do have students, and so you might be in a little different situation. But for most organizations, you do have employees. Those employees are the people who are accessing Process Director. There are a couple of things that every employee has to do. So you might want to make a default workspace that allows them to, submit a vacation request or submit a, change of employee information or, really standard things like that, that pretty much every member of the organization is going to have to access on a more or less routine basis, and have that workspace as the default workspace. Now, you can have as many workspaces as you want. So as you can see, I keep hitting the wrong button here. As you can see, I have all of these workspaces here. I've got workspace for Monica still in here that I haven't deleted, but you can have as many workspaces as you want, and you can assign different people to different workspaces, obviously. But you do need to have that one generic workspace for all of your users. Speaking of users, it doesn't matter so much on a dev or staging system, but on a production system, whenever you're administering users, now for most of you, on your production system, you're either using Windows Single Sign-On or SAML, which is essentially the federated identity version of Windows Single Sign-On, except it's not Windows, it's SAML. But fine, all of your normal users have a SAML login. Now, you do need system administrators on both dev and production machines. On a production machine, you should never make any of your SAML or Windows SSO users system administrators. So if you're a system administrator and you normally access a production system not to do Process Director administrative things, but to fill out your leave request or whatever it may be, filling out a form and submitting it. You don't want to do that as an administrator. So you do not want to make your SAML or Windows SSO user account a system administrator. For production machines especially, although the same is possibly true for dev and staging servers, your normal account should just be a regular user account. You should be in a normal user group, and you should just have access as an end user to the things that you would normally have access to as a normal end user. For your system administrator account, you need to have a separate system administrator account that is a built-in account, which is to say you need to create that user inside the UI, create their username and password, and then set them as a system administrator. And whenever you need to do system administrator things, you'll log into that account. When you just need to do normal user things on the production system, your normal method of logging in will be just like every other user. You'll go to SAML. You'll click the Login as SAML button. You'll be identified. You'll be in the system, and you'll access the user level things that you're supposed to have access to. Do not share administrative accounts between multiple system administrators. Now, that's a rule that we break here at BP Logix. If you're on a cloud account, there is a BPL support user. Often that support user is me, but it is also often a member of the engineering team because you have an issue that needs to be looked into, or maybe one of our implementers who are assisting you with some sort of direct assistance. Either we're building something for you or we're troubleshooting something for you. We kind of have to do that, but you should not. So do as I say, not as I do. Each one of your system administrators should have a unique account. And the reason for that is being able to track them, because you can now then go into your audit log, and if administrator A made a change to something, now you know what administrator A did, and you know who administrator A is. So it's important to have those separate administration accounts for each person who is a system administrator. I'm trying to figure out which would be the most logical way to go next, but let's continue to talk about administrators, right? So let's look at Diana. Let's look at the account for someone, or Barb. Let's look at the account for someone who's not a real person. So here's Barb Stanley's account. She can't really do anything. She's a normal end user, or at least she currently is. So there are some things you need to think about that now apply to the user account. These are all relatively new features. Some of them, if you're on 5.44.1104, anything below 6.1, you might see some different properties here, fewer properties. But if you're on 6.1.x or higher, these are the properties that you're going to see. So in Process Director, we've changed the UI. It's not that old tabbed user interface anymore. We have all of these cool menus up here at the top, and we can switch our workspaces, and we can turn the content list on and off. Well, we can turn it on if I have it pinned, so it's not going anywhere. And then we can go and look at the home page of the entire installation. At least I can, because I'm the system administrator on this machine. But because of this change to the UI, where we no longer have this tabbed UI, we have this menu system UI. We need to give people different access to different parts of the machine or different parts of the UI without making them system administrators. So in general, if you have someone who is a Process Director implementer, but they are not a system administrator, so you don't want to give them access to any of the stuff here in the IT admin area, you're going to want to make them a developer. That allows them to see two things. It allows them to see the content list. So the content list menu will appear at the top of the screen, and they'll be able to access the content list as we see here. And they can also see the home page. And so on the Process Director homepage, you can see all the things that you would normally see on a homepage. They would have their favorites, they're recently modified, they would all be here. Just because you've given someone developer access doesn't mean that they can access anything they want in the content list. They can see it, and they can click on things, but it doesn't mean that the thing they click on is actually going to open for them, because permissions will apply. And we'll talk about permissions in a little bit. But if I don't have permission to see a thing in the content list, I'm not going to see it in the content list, even if you have granted me developer permissions on the machine, because all those developer permissions are going to allow me to do is to see the content list and to see the home page. If I want to create anything or build anything on the system, I still have to have the appropriate folder permissions in the content list to be able to access that stuff. So what this largely is a property that at the end of the day just changes the UI for me slightly to give me access to different portions of the UI. But you can now have developers, and I know we have one customer that has a couple of folders in their content list, and different developers have access to different folders. And if I'm a developer in Group A, I can't get into Group B's folder. I can't see any of their objects. I can't make changes to them. In fact, I don't even think I can see Group B's folder because I don't have view permission for it in the content list. But I might have view, modify, and even delete permission on my own unique folder. So this is a good way to have implementers, but we don't have to give implementers system administrator privileges like we used to have to be able to get them to see all of the different elements were part of the old UI. To be able to go in and make changes and do things, you largely had to be a system administrator. And now you don't. So we have separated sort of the implementation work from the administration work in the system. There's also user impersonation ability. Now in the 6.1 UI, our impersonate user is accessible directly from the user profile menu on every page. So at any point, I can impersonate a user, but I only see this menu item if I'm given user impersonation ability. So feel free to give user impersonation ability to your implementers because it does enable them to impersonate other users, which is really useful on a development system. I'm building a system. I have tasks assigned to different users. I need to be able to view the system as those users while I'm building things. So you may also want to give your implementers user impersonation ability. User impersonation ability used to be an extraordinarily dangerous property to assign to a user, because what it meant was, like on this system, if I gave Barb user impersonation ability, Barb could then impersonate me as a system administrator, and she would now have all of the privileges while pretending to be me that I have as me. That was not optimal. So we've changed that. So I can impersonate somebody, but I don't get any more power than I currently have as an implementer. So I can't impersonate a system administrator anymore and become a de facto system administrator and make changes to the system. So we've improved that, but user impersonation ability is really great. Usually if you have a developer, you're going to want to assign them both developer and user impersonation ability privileges. And now we can use user impersonation with much more confidence, knowing that they can't get system level permissions simply by impersonating another user. So confine your system administrator roles to people who really need to be system administrators. You may want to take advantage, and it's always a good idea, especially if you're going to have multiple administrators, of just granting partial admin permissions to some users. For example, if you have some technical people who need to troubleshoot the system on occasion, give them system troubleshooting admin. It's only going to give them access to the system troubleshooting area. They can't go in and change users. They can't go in and change any of the installation settings, but it does give them access to all the logs and the other information that you need to be able to troubleshoot items. Plus, troubleshooting also gives you access to the system control page, which is its default page, which gives you all these little abilities here to, reload the settings, write diagnostics, run delete cleanups, sort of normal housekeeping stuff. This is useful maybe for some of your IT people to have access to so that they can go and troubleshoot things that are going on your system that might be related to your local network environment. So whenever you can, avail yourself of the ability to use those partial system administration roles, of which there are several, to have different users be enabled to administer a limited portion, but only that limited portion of your system. If you look over on the left-hand side of your screen, you can look at this partition, and I am logged in as BPL support. That's the wrong login for this machine. I need to log out and log back in. But I guess it's good that I'm logged in as BPL support currently, because I can see that I have three partitions here: default partition, development partition, and test partition. And if I log out and log back in as me, instead of BPL support, if I go back to my content list, I'm going to see the default partition, and I have a little partition here called training courses. And this is where I store the sample training courses that I create in the course of creating training for Process Director or Approvia or what have you. So I have access to two partitions here. You need to think very carefully about whether you need separate partitions. Let's start by defining what a partition is. A partition is a portion of the content list that cannot speak to any other partition in the system. So I have this training courses partition and I have this default partition. They have different things in them. Partitions will usually have different users, although it's possible to have users who have access to multiple partitions. Indeed, I'm one here. I have access to these two partitions, and aside from the default partition, which we both share, the BPL support user also has access to that development partition and the other one that we saw, which I don't remember what it was at this point in time. But partition data cannot be shared between partitions. Do you need a multiple partition on your system? Almost certainly no. You almost certainly want to have everybody in the same partition, and you want to have one partition where you do your work. That's not really a problem because of the way that we do permissions, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, but I can actually segregate users off so different classes of users can only have access to a certain part of the content list. So they'll only be able to, sorry, didn't mean to click that. They'll only be able to submit forms from a particular portion of the content list, and they won't be able to see, even if they did have access to the content list, which, oh, by the way, they shouldn't. You can handle most use case issues and most security issues with permissions in the system. There are very, very few instances in the real world where you need multiple partitions on your system. If you're an on-premise customer, however, and you only have, one server license and it's really your production server, that might be a case where you would have multiple partitions. You might have a development partition where you do all of your development work, and then you can export from the development partition and import your finished work into the production partition. That's not great. It's not optimal, but it can be done. For most other installations, creating multiple partitions is more of a headache than it's worth, because partitions don't talk to each other, they don't share users. So it's going to increase my user management burden. Should this new user have access to both partitions? Maybe, maybe not. All of these questions become more complicated. How are users managed? Who can manage the content list in each of the partitions? I mean, do I need to create partition administrators? If I make one person a partition administrator and then I add them to both partitions, are they going to be able to fully manage both partitions? Yes. Do I want them to be able to do that? Maybe not. So multiple partitions are often more trouble than they're worth, especially because they don't talk to each other. That's the whole point of partitions. I want to have a firewall between partition A and partition B, and they're not going to share stuff. Now, that complicates things because what that means, if we turn our system folders back on, is that I'm going to have the custom task folder imported twice. So anytime I want to update my custom tasks, I have to remember I have multiple partitions. So now I've got to import the custom tasks into both partitions. Each partition is going to have its own template library and template data, the custom utilities. In fact, in this one, you can see I have the knowledge views folder with all of the knowledge views that we provide. And I have that in my default partition. I neglected to bring it in here to the training courses partition, because I don't need it. But if I did, I wouldn't have access to these knowledge views in this partition, because when I run these knowledge views, they are only going to show me stuff that is in the default partition. If I want to see these knowledge views and run them in the training courses partition, I have to install them there too. Multiple partitions are a headache. And even me, who has these two partitions, and I think I have a good reason to have a training courses partition, largely because I'm an incompetent who will lose my training courses if I just stick them in the main partition. That, I guess, is an acceptable use case, or at least it's acceptable to me. So feel free to do it yourself, I guess, since I do it. But multiple partitions are pain, and avoid pain is always a good operating principle. Don't make your life harder than it has to be unless you absolutely, positively have a good use case for having two discrete, separate content lists that you need, because I can't have information leak from one partition to another partition. Like I said, in most cases, you don't need multiple partitions. So don't worry about setting them up. When you do, just remember, each one of these partitions, I have to assign the users or groups that go into that partition. The same is true, and this is especially true for groups. Now, I run into this all the time when I'm doing a little testing or something like that, and I say, okay, I need to create a group, and I'll go ahead and create a group, and and then the group doesn't show up. I'm like, I just created this group. Why am I not seeing this group? And by the way, this is true if you have one partition or 20. No matter where you've created the group, groups have to be assigned to the partition or they don't show up. And so I'm sitting here trying to make my group picker work, and it never works because I have not gone into the partition and assigned the groups. So when your groups get created, especially if you have multiple partitions on the system, you need to assign users to those particular groups. Now, well, that's not what I wanted to hit. Let's go back to configuration and back to partitions. For my default partition, there is a new users added to the system should automatically be added to this partition. And this, which I really do need to check, and I don't know why it's unchecked. Maybe that's why I'm having so many problems. New groups added to the system should be automatically added to this partition. So that, if you only have one partition, will solve your groups problem, because every time you create a group, you automatically want them added to the partition. So the default partition is indeed my default partition. So when I add new groups, I need to assign them to the partition. I should not need on my default partition to go through and do what I've done and assign all the groups to that particular partition. So if you have one partition, turn both of these things on. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And unless you have a compelling reason, you should only have one partition. Global knowledge views. I don't have much to say about them other than don't mess with them. Don't go in and say, well, I'd like to change this. These are the global knowledge views. If you make a change to any of these, it changes the UI for all of your users. So exercise caution. There are some things that you don't want to mess with in here. Number one is your task list, and number two is your content list. Do not go in here and cowboy your way through the global knowledge views and say, well, I'm going to change the content list. I promise you, you will not be happy with the results. Had customers that have done it. It's perfectly fine if you want to make a copy of any of these knowledge views and create your own, custom task list or your own forms I can submit, whatever it may be. That's fine. But you really don't want to mess with any of these things, and you certainly don't want to mess with the task list or the content list global knowledge views. They're there. We can see them. Let us be satisfied with the knowledge that they exist and that they work. And beyond that, leave those two things especially alone. Let's keep talking about the content list, because this is another important thing that you need to do whenever you first install the system, and that is partitions. Let us be sure that for our partitions, we apply them early and we give them adequate security. Now, obviously, a staging and development server are going to have much looser permissions than your production server. But in general, on your production server, you want to go as high as you can in the content list, which in this case happens to be the default partition. Go into the properties of that partition and look at your permissions. This is the default permission set that you see when Process Director is first installed. That's not good, because you do not want users to be able to view, modify, or delete your content list objects. You are going to need, and I have an entire webinar on permissions, so we're not going to get into the specifics of permissions methodology, but you do need to set very restrictive permissions. For all authenticated users, you can keep this, by the way, that's a fine permission to keep, but really the only permissions that your users absolutely positively have to have is going to be run permission. In general, end users are going to do two things. They're going to open up forms and submit them, and they're going to run some knowledge views. So run is great. Now, the knowledge view part gets a little tricky, because if I run a knowledge view, in most circumstances, that knowledge view is going to return form instances, and I'm going to want to be able to open that form instance. So I am actually going to need, if I'm ever going to show a knowledge view to any user, I'm actually going to need view children permissions as well. So I still won't be able to look at the, let's say it's a form. I still won't be able to look at the form definition or modify it or edit it. But I will be able to look at form instances, and I do need to have that view children turned on, because if I'm going to run a knowledge view, I'm going to show those form instances. The end user needs to be able to look at them. They need to be able to open them up and use them. Now, the reason why these are the only two permissions that we need for all authenticated users, and indeed for almost all users on the system really, is that's all they're going to do. They're going to access the system as end users, and they're only going to do two things. They're going to look at knowledge views and they're going to submit forms. Everything else should be hidden away from them. I don't need to provide them with modified children. Now, you would think, well, if I only give them run and view children, how are they ever going to be able to, if I have a task assigned to them, how they're going to be able to edit the form? Don't I have to give them modified children? No, you do not. When you get assigned a task in Process Director, you get a special set of permissions that get applied if you open, in most cases, a form in the context of the task. You are going to receive the appropriate permissions to edit that specific form instance whenever you are a task participant. So you'll always get the appropriate level of system permissions that you need to complete a task in Process Director when some activity is assigned to you. But as soon as you complete that task, you no longer have those permissions for that specific form instance. They just all go away. So I don't need to provide you with modified children or what have you to enable you to complete your tasks. So almost all of your users need to have run and view children permission, and they don't need much more than that. Having said that, we messed up a little bit. And we fixed that mess up, but there is a narrow window of version numbers in the 6.1.3xx series that are going to work a little different on permissions for one important thing, and that is the custom tasks. So in general, we had this setup where if we look at our custom tasks and we'll go, well, I have all users can access anything, but let's just open up a custom task. It doesn't matter which one it is. And let's go to its permissions. Now, of course, on my system, everything is all open. If you had a form or a process timeline and you wanted to add a custom task to the form or process timeline, as long as you had view permission on the custom tasks, you could open up the form and you could add a custom task, and you could configure that custom task by opening the CT form and making whatever changes you wanted to, and then saving it, and then run your form and everything works and we're all happy. We decided that we wanted to tighten security up on that a little bit. So what we did is we said, okay, well, you can configure a custom task in a form or process timeline if we give you modify permission for the custom task. Okay, sounds good. That way, okay, only people with modify permissions on the custom task can go in and go into a form and can make changes to the form definition or any custom tasks that are associated with that form definition. They just won't be able to configure them unless they have modified permissions. It sounds more secure, but it's actually a little problematic. First of all, what it means is that to enable an implementer to configure a custom task on some random form definition, I have now given them permission to go to the custom task itself and make changes to it. Oh, that's not a great idea. So going to have to make some changes. And those changes will come in the next release of Process Director, which is, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to inherit the permissions that you have set on the form definition to determine whether or not you can configure a CT for that form. So if you have configure or modify permission on a form definition, then you'll be able to configure the custom task on that form or process timeline definition. We're going to inherit the parent object's properties to determine whether or not you're able to edit it. That, I think, is a much better way of doing it, and we won't have to give modify permissions to be able to configure custom tasks. We'll determine that at the form level. So that is a change coming up to permissions. So just keep that in mind. we're going through an uncomfortable transition phase, trying to figure out how to appropriately ensure security on the custom tasks so that people can't, break them without us wanting them to be able to break them. But you do need to put these permissions on early, and you need to enforce them uh, ideally as soon as the permissions, or as soon as you get the system set up. In general, we're going to want to apply permissions at the folder level. And by placing permissions at the folder level first, so whenever you're creating a new folder, assuming it does not inherit the appropriate permissions from its parent when you create it, go in and set the appropriate permissions for all of the objects that you, or the permissions that you want for all of the objects that are going to exist in that folder. Once you've set it at the folder level, it makes your life a lot easier, because whenever you create a new form, process, timeline, what have you, they're all going to inherit the permissions that you placed on the folder. We really don't want to get into the business, especially over the long term, of trying to figure out what permissions go with what different objects. Trying to run permissions at the object level, especially as your content list grows, is just going to become an increasingly painful administrative task. So confine your changes to the folder level, and then you can replicate permissions to either just the content list objects or to the content list objects and any instances that exist inside the folder. And then you can just sort of have a uniform set of permissions that go all the way across. So let's go back to installation settings. There are a couple of things that are very important to set up whenever you first get your system installed. I think we do this for you automatically whenever we set you up as a cloud customer. But if you're an on-premise customer, you really are going to want to use the interface URL and put in the URL of your installation wherever it may be on your system. Obviously, for people who are running Process Director inside their network, they're going to have some sort of weird URL because it needs to reflect their internal DNS naming conventions or what have you. But whatever that URL is, you need to throw it in here. No trailing space. That's super important. Not trailing space, but trailing slash. It is super important that you do not do that, because there's a system variable that gets created called, oddly enough, interface URL, which you can use anywhere you need to generate a URL. So like you want to show a knowledge view. So you're going to want to show, I believe the page is kview.aspx. Well, you can just use the interface URL system variable slash kview.aspx, and it'll just bring up that knowledge view page. Although obviously there'll be an object ID, a knowledge view ID. You have to append to that as a system or not a system variable, but a URL parameter. But set your interface URL. It is going to make your life a lot easier, especially if you have a system that is sort of open and you want to be able to provide people with URLs in emails and things like that. Being able just to use interface URL, it's honestly a lot easier than typing https:// whatever your internal URL is. It's especially true for some of you. I've seen your internal URLs, and you have, server names workflow dot server name, which is usually some server ID with a mix of letters and numbers, dot internal dot. It's going to be a lot easier just to write interface underscore URL in a system variable to pull all of that data back. So it just makes your life easier. So be sure that you set that. If you're going to have, and this is largely for on-premise, if you're going to do this for cloud, it's something we're going to have to help you with, because we would have to set it up. But If you know that your system, for example, we have a customer that is a global advertising agency, and they're doing ad approvals, and they're going to have super high res images, at 1200 DPI, full page newspaper images that are coming in as what is the EPS, encapsulated postscript files. They're huge. Um, Brochures that they put out, television and radio ads, so they have video and audio things. That's going to make your database puff up like a tick. So if you're going to have, and usually you know whether you're going to have this based on the type of business that you are, but if you know you are going to have a lot of attachments, document attachments, that are going to be very large files, especially media files, you really are going to want to look at setting up a shared folder in your network, putting that folder path here, and then determining, okay, how am I going to determine whether something goes to the file system to store or whether I store it in the process director database? So you can set a document size for file storage. Now, the default is 0. So if I set a document storage path here, all of my file attachments, so every attachment I made to a form or process, they would all go straight to the file system. Now, you may not want to do that. What you may want is to set a document size, and this is the document size in bytes that you want stored locally, and anything larger than that will get stored in the file system. So, if I decide that anything under, uh, a million bytes, 1 megabyte, and a million actually isn't 1 megabyte, but it's close. Anything larger than a megabyte will go into the file system, and anything smaller, so a lot of Word docs, PDFs, and things like that, would stay in the process director database. For your end, you also can store stuff locally initially and then move it to the file system. If you're going to have really big files, you are going to want to consider file system storage. It's less convenient for you if you're a cloud customer. You'll have to talk with us about that because we'd have to set up that file storage for you. Happily, for your end users, they neither know nor care where the actual binaries for these files are being stored. Whether they're stored in a file system or whether they're stored in the database, doesn't matter to them. Well, I say that, but it might matter to them, because if I'm taking a whole bunch of, 4 and 5 gigabyte video files to every, form instance that gets attached, my database is going to get very, very large. And I've got to take this binary file out of the database. So I got to pull it out of SQL Server, kind of reconstruct the file into its proper format, and then present it to the end user if they, click the download button or what have you. A whole bunch of really large files are going to make the database kind of clog up a bit. SQL Server is generally pretty good about returning large amounts of data, but you may have a lot of data to chop through in the database, and having those very large file attachments might just work better for you to store them in file storage. So consider that whenever you're setting up your system. How's all this stuff going to work? Customize the logos. So for, this is my logo, BP Logix Training. I have one on the documentation server that looks exactly like that, but it says documentation. Brand your server to get rid of the BP Logix logos. You have the ability to do that. You have the logo that you want to use, and you can determine where you want the system to go when people click that logo, which I think here is like doc.bplogix.com, right? So there we go. I click it, it opens up the product documentation. I did that to make my life a little bit easier. You will probably do that because you have valid marketing reasons for doing so. But set your logo URL, get rid of it in Process Director. Another thing about logos, and we don't talk about this much because for the most part, people have a single logo and they want to show it in the entire system. But you don't have to. Something else you may want to consider, and this is kind of one of those, it's not really a best practice. It's kind of one of those decorative things that you should think about, and that is going into your workspace and what's the property there? It's right there in advanced options. There's a logo URL and a logo link inside every workspace. Technically, I could use a different logo for every workspace in the system. That's pretty cool. Now, in the 6.1 UI, we did discover that setting a workspace logo does not refresh as often as we would like it to. It will eventually refresh, but it won't show up immediately because up here at the very top, we don't refresh this menu bar a lot. We really only refresh from the navigation bar and down whenever we switch workspaces. This doesn't get reloaded. And so we did notice that when people were using a logo URL for their workspace, they would change it, they would update it, and they would say, okay, well, let's swap workspaces. And they would expect to see their logo pop up, and it didn't, because swapping workspaces only affects everything from here on down. And so the logo wasn't updating, but of course, next time you came into Process Director and you open up that workspace, the logo would magically be there. So we've changed that a little bit. So if you set the logo URL, we are going to refresh the logo image up here at the very top without refreshing the entire top portion. So that's just a little thing that we ran into, but you may want to consider using a custom logo for any of your workspaces. I don't think that's as necessary now as it would have been in the previous UIs that we had for the product, because all we had at the top was sort of this this tabbed user interface, and everything was on those tabs, and they kind of just updated automatically anytime you changed a page. And so you knew where you were in the system looking at the tabs. It is less obvious now. So arguably, workspace logos have become more important than they would have been in the previous version of the product for branding. But we also don't have multiple places where the logo shows up. It shows up right here in the upper left-hand corner, and that's it. That's where our identity and branding actually is. So that's where you look for it. By the way, these colors at the very top, I should just tell you, those are completely fungible. You can change those via CSS. So instead of having this dark blue bar at the top, you can change that. I happen to be looking at a customer server the other day, and I just noticed that they have replaced that blue color 082F4D in hexadecimal. They have replaced it with some, let's be charitable, a color that I personally would not have elected to show because of its screechingly bright color. But you can certainly do that. You can make those UI changes. That's not a best practice either. I'm not telling you you should do that. I'm just telling you that you could do that. What time is it? It's 11 o'clock and we still haven't gotten off of the basic server stuff. So going back to installation settings, there's nothing else I can see that it's super important for you to set up in there. Global variables. There's nothing in here that I would change normally. Oh, there is something that is important to set up on global variables that you should never forget. Set your workflow from email address. Now, you can overwrite this in the email data control on any email template. That's perfectly fine. But do provide a workflow from email address that will be the from address for every notification that goes out from the system. So every time somebody is assigned a task or their task completes or what have you, or any other system notifications, this is the primary email address from whence they come. So we have BPL tests set up for this one. It's a real inbox, although I think it automatically bounces back a don't ever write me again response if you try to send it emails. But you do need to have that workflow from email address set on your system. So you'll, especially if you're an on-premise customer, well, actually, if you're a cloud customer as well, you're probably going to want to create an email account to use for those email notifications that go out from the system. It could be an unmonitored inbox. It could be an inbox that doesn't even accept mail. And you might have to put in a note on your email templates like I have on a couple of the notifications, like when you do a document feedback. There's a little notification that says, or at least to me, whenever I get the email that says, don't reply to this email address because it's just going to get deleted. In fact, it may even be undeliverable. So you might want to have an email address like that set up on your system. There is nothing in database settings and nothing in licensing that we need to look at, so we can go right on past that. One of the nice things to set up on a server, I'm not sure it's a best practice, but I do use it, is set the environment message. Now, up here at the very top, it says training server. Most of the time, you don't see that on your installation. That area is blank, but the reason it says that here is because I have training server set as the environmental message seen by all users. In fact, if we go to the documentation server, I log in there real fast, we can immediately see documentation running latest dev build of 6.1.500. So that tells me that this is right out there on the bleeding edge of technology, or at least where the bleeding edge of technology was as of Friday morning. So I'm sure there are some changes that we've had since then. But on that server control page, you should be able to, and it's a good idea, if not on your production server, at least on your dev and your stage servers, to let people know that they're in a dev environment or stage environment. There is a set message seen by all users, which kind of does the same thing, although it's really intended to do something a little bit different. So let's set this message seen by all users. So what the set message seen by all user does is set up a banner. This is great if there's some sort of issue going on with your system, like, you're doing some maintenance on the server and it may slow things up, or you're doing something on the database that may affect connectivity, whatever it might be, that may be some network problems. It's great to have this banner. I see some people have set up this message that says you're on the development server or you're on the production server, exclamation point, exclamation point. I mean, I guess that's okay. You can do what you want. But I think if you're just specifying the environment, your best practice is to use the set environment message seen by all user. I think this is a little more subtle showing up over here. But I mean, technically, you can set a message seen by all users, and you can do that right from this page. The set message seen by all users is really only useful, I think, periodically whenever something is going on that you want to notify users about, some sort of temporary state of affairs. For permanent messaging, the set environment message is probably the best property to set. And of course, for me, it tells me as soon as I'm logging on, because I have the default UI on both of these, and I might be on the admin profile on both of them. It's nice just to be able to look and see, oh, okay, I'm running on the documentation server now, as opposed to, over here. Where's my mouse? I lost my mouse. Over here, I'm looking obviously at the training server. So it becomes easy for me just by looking up there to tell what box I'm looking at whenever I'm logged in. Anytime that you have an email problem, and we get this all the time, and we always ask the same question very first time when we get it. The system is not sending out emails. It's a disaster. The sky is falling. And our first question is always, oh, have you gone to run email tests and sent out a test message to yourself and see if it works? Oh, well, no. Well, maybe you should. Anytime there's an email issue and someone says, I'm not getting email, it might have gone in their junk folder. They might have inadvertently deleted it. I don't know. But the first thing is, oh, the system is not sending out email. We must panic now. No, we mustn't panic. There are a lot of things that could cause the user not to be seeing their email, or as the user will say, I never got your email. Look, that may be true, but it may also not be true. Hey, let's go to run email tests, and I'm going to send myself an email and we'll see what happens. And if I magically receive the email, then our primary assumption should be that the system is sending email as expected. The nice thing about the run email test is that it allows you to do a couple of things. First of all, by default, it will use whatever your configured settings are for email to test that. But you can also use the local IIS SMTP server. Not if you're a cloud customer, because we're not going to let you do it. But if you're an on-premise customer, you can, because hey, it's your network. You can do whatever you want. And the use specific SMTP server, which will allow me to uniquely configure a email server, a standard IMAP slash, well, I guess it would be IMAP, but a standard SMTP server, or a server set up in Azure for Microsoft, or a Gmail server, which of course would require the OAuth stuff. But you can configure those servers independently and see if another server is working. But your first stop whenever you start getting email questions is to go here and to see, okay, is my system sending emails? If yes, okay, then our next stop is to go into the logs. The logs are extraordinarily useful. You all have access to the logs, whether you're a cloud or a on-premise user, and the logs tell you everything that's happened on the machine. Now, there is indeed a specific log for emails, which will tell you every email that got sent off of the machine, whether it was successful or whether it was not successful. So if you don't see the email here, that means it wasn't sent. If you get someone who says, I didn't get this email that I was supposed to get, well, let's look and see if it was sent. Was it sent? Does the email notification start off with the word success? If so, you know the email got sent out. We recommend that you use Mail Relay for emails. Now, if we go back to our system information, and I've lost my mouse pointer again, If we go back to our system information, no, that's not where we want to go. We want to go back to installation settings. And we go into our SMTP section. Our recommendation is that you use Mail Relay to send mail. Now, this will require that you configure your email server to accept Mail Relay from the Process Director server, whatever it may be. So, whatever the server's IP address is, 40 dot whatever. Which, by the way, those are all internal IP addresses for Azure. But anytime that this system sends a mail, what it does is it sends it via Mail Relay directly through our Exchange server on Outlook.com. And our Exchange server is configured to just automatically accept emails from this Process Director server without question. That is the best way to set up email. You know, you have all this stuff where you can set up your SMTP port and you can set up your user ID and password for a specific account to use that account to send email, set up your SSL, all of that stuff. That's all great. You can do that. But the way Process Director sends mail is if you are sending it through, a fully configured SMTP system with a user ID and password, what Process Director is going to do is it's going to send that email to that inbox for transmission, and then it's basically going to hang up on the mail server. Did the mail go through? I don't know. I sent the mail. You can look it up in the logs. It says success. Did the mail go through? Who knows? Because I don't get very good error tracking if I'm setting up SMTP like this. But if I am using Mail Relay, and all I really need for that is my SMTP host, now we're going to send the email a little bit differently, because now we're going to ping that server and say, hey, I got a message. Here's the message. Will you send this for me? And the server is going to look at that message and determine yes or no. It's not going to send it. And if it determines no, it's going to send back much more detailed error logging. If you have a fully configured SMTP setup here where you're using a specific account, I'm going to get way less verbose error messages from, most of the time it's Exchange. So we'll just say it's the Exchange server. But if I send it via Mail Relay, I'm going to get much more detailed error information. That's going to be much more helpful for me as an administrator to figure out why my email is not going. Most of the time, if I'm using Mail Relay especially, most of the time the problem is going to be on the mail side, not going to be on the Process Director side. The thing is, if you set up your mail this way and someone says, I'm not getting mail, you're going to go into troubleshooting. You're going to send yourself an email test, see if that works. If it does, then you're going to look at the logs. You're going to look at the email logs and see if that email was sent, and see if it says success. Well, that's a pretty good indication when you're using Mail Relay that there's an issue on the mail side. The server took the mail. The server said it could successfully send it. Whatever happened after that. Now, it could be that you get a DNR receipt. Now, we're not going to know that because if you get a non-delivery receipt back from like an external email system, I'm not going to know that at the time I send the mail. So I'm going to see success in my mail log. The error doesn't crop up until later. So in investigating the I never got an email problem, you may have to do a lot of your investigating on that mail server if you're an on-premise customer. Obviously, if you're a cloud customer, that's an investigation that we would do for you because you're basically using our mail system. Unless, and we have cloud customers who do this, you don't want to use our mail system, which is perfectly fine. Actually, it's probably preferable if you can set up Mail Relay on your mail server to take mail from the process director server at 6.1.3. No, where's the 172.22.11.177. It'll make it easier for you to track your own mails. If you use ours, which is a little bit different than this, but I'm not going to open up a customer site to see what the exact verbiage is for the SMTP host, but it's email.com. It's a publicly available SMTP service at email.com. Then we'll have to do the investigation for you. You don't really have control over your email. Your email address will work and it'll kind of look like it came from your system, but in point of fact, it doesn't. This gives you a lot fuller control over the email if you just point it to your own mail server and enable that server for mail relay. So that will help you with mail issues, and you'll also have full control over investigating what you need to investigate if you are someone says they're not getting emails. There is a system variable for the audit logs. All of your audit logs are stored as text, just like all of the other log files. You can access it from the logs page. But these are big log files. Well, actually, they're not big log files because if they're in text, their maximum size is going to be 2 megabytes. Thing is, audit logging is super verbose. And when an audit file in the text log files reaches 2 megabytes, we take the current log file, we save it as, like for audit logs, it would be a.bak1. And we have a new blank empty a.log to start recording the auto log. The log that was back1 will now become .back2, and we'll go all the way through back12. Now, 2 megabytes is a lot of data, especially when you're just dealing with text. So it does go, it can go back relatively far in time, unless you have a lot of users on your machine, because the audit log is tracking everything that every user does and is giving you a message about everything that every user does. If you have a lot of users, there's going to be a lot of those messages, and it's going to fill that 2 megabyte log file really quickly. And so you're not going to be able to see all that far back into the past. So there is a custom variable that can be set to turn on database audit logging. It is not turned on by default. So for my system, for example, if I click search, it's going to return no records found for me because I don't have database logging turned on this server. I'm pretty much the only person on this server. If something comes up all wonky, I've got a pretty good idea who did it. So I don't really need to have my audit logs stored in the database. You do, because you do want to be able to track back. These text audit logs at 2 megabytes per file with the current file and 12 backups, audit logs are not going to go that far back in time. And as a result, if something happened last month that you're just hearing about, you're not going to find it in the audit logs. Your time for discovering who did what at that particular time has passed. But if you store it in the database, you do have the ability to keep it stored in that database for a long time. In fact, we have a customer who just had some sort of issue and said, hey, somebody changed something last month. Who, what, where, when, how? Well, they're keeping their audit logs. In fact, they got like 5 years of data in their audit logs. Now, look, that's going to be a really big database table with millions and millions of entries in it. But again, SQL Server, it's just a row of text entries. Pretty easy to chop through that pretty quickly and go back, and we could say, okay, well, look here, back in May, this person updated the permissions on that object. And then they went into this object and updated those permissions as well. So this By storing it in the database, I get access to all of these search features so that I can search for, either specific dates or a specific object name or a specific type of action that may have occurred, like a user got deleted or what have you. And I can search my logs, and for however long you're going to keep your log files in the database, which you have complete control over, um, you can go back and find out whatever happened on your system. You don't usually need it on a day-to-day basis, but it's good to have those log files stored in the database. So I would say the best practice would be to store your audit logs in the database. Now, it's only the audit logs, so it only provides you with auditing information about who did what on a system. They submitted a form, they logged in, they logged out, they looked at a knowledge view. That's great, having all of that data, but you need to be able to look back in time. So storing it in the database is important. Now, I don't, right off the top of my head, remember what those custom bars are. So we're going to have to go to doc, because I do want to show you where it is. Actually, I can get it right here from System Administrator. So we can go into IT Admin area. We can go into troubleshooting. We can go into audit logs. And there it is, the F audit log file only custom variable. In fact, there are a couple of those custom variables for the auditing, and they're in auditing custom variables. So we can get to them from here. But by default, audit logging is only done in the file system. So this is where they're actually stored on your system. That's the folder they're stored. So you want to set this to false. Like I said, the default is true. You set this to false, it'll start saving those logs in the database. Now, you may want to limit the amount of time that we go back in time. So, pick some reasonable amount of time. I picked 10 days here. That's probably too short, but that was just for documentation purposes. Maybe you want to go back 6 months, which I think is useful for most purposes. Maybe you want to go back a year for some sort of auditing reason. I think that's reasonable as well. Like I said, we have a customer that has 5 years worth of audit logs, so they can go back and reconstruct just about anything that happened, although at the cost of, a fairly large database table with millions of rows. But you have that control. So think about setting your audit logs to the database, at least to store the last, month or so of audit logs, so that if something happened a couple of weeks ago, you can easily go back and reconstruct who did it. Wow, we've really only talked about administration stuff so far, but I think we're done with that. It's 11:22, so we are running out of time. So let's move on to some best practices in terms of design. So I am going to move that folder out of here because that's the old folder from last week, which we don't need anymore. And we'll just create a new folder for this webinar. And we'll just call it BP for best practices. All right, so I'm going to create a new application. So let's talk about some of the application development best practices that you should be enforcing. So I have this new application I want to create. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a parent folder. I've called it BP for best practices, but this is my parent folder. Every object that I need for this application, so my form, my process, timeline, most likely most of the business rules that I'm going to use, knowledge views that are associated with the form or the process, they all need to be created inside this folder. Now, it doesn't matter much what sort of organization that you create inside this folder. So if you want to have a separate folder for forms and a separate folder for process timelines and one for knowledge use, go ahead and knock yourself out. I wouldn't do that. I would put the form and the process timeline in this folder. And then if I had knowledge views or business rules, I'd create the appropriate subfolders as needed. And the reason I'm going to do this is because whenever I finish creating this application, what I'm going to want to export is this entire folder. So the folder name should be my application name. It should contain all of the objects I need to make this run. There will be some exceptions. I'm probably going to have some business values. The business values are going to be stored in most cases here in the business values folder. If I have some global business rules, there may be business rules in that folder. If I have drop-down objects, I mean, these are all global objects. So I should, on both systems, have the same global objects in both systems at the same folder location. So I should, in fact, on both my dev and production servers, have the drop-down objects folders that would contain a drop-down, my drop-down, whatever the name is. All of my custom tasks need to be at the root level of both folders, so that whenever I import my project, it knows where to find the custom tasks or the business values or the drop-downs in the content list because they have the same name and they're both contained in the same folder location. So what I can do, if in that case where all of my local objects are here in the BP folder and all of my global objects are in the same relative file location on both systems and have the same names, all I have to do is export this one folder, and I can export it and all of its contents and then import it onto my production machine, and it all comes in at one time. It's going to make my life a lot easier. Now, if I'm going to put everything in this folder, first thing I need to do when I create this folder is I need to think about permissions. Are we going to have special permissions on this folder that are different from the general permissions of the partition itself? If so, cool. This is the time to go in and to make those permission changes on this folder. You do it now at the very beginning so that as you create the objects, permissions inheritance will ensure that all the objects that you create apply the same permissions that are in the parent folder. So I only have to set those permissions once when I create my application folder. Then I never, ever have to think about them again, ever. As I said, I'm going to want to create all of my objects inside this folder. There are some best practices to think about whenever we're creating each of these objects. Most of the stuff I've talked about at various times here. So, I mean, really, nothing I say today should be unfamiliar to you because I've talked about it at some point in the past 5 years. But it's useful to have a single place where everything is all concatenated. But, and I know that we've talked about this a lot whenever we are creating a form definition. So I'm just going to call this the BP form. I created a folder. Well, isn't that special? So let's delete that. Now let's create a form. There we go. Now we'll have a form. And it's going to want to take us straight here to the online form designer. That's fine. There's not much that I want to talk about here other than this. Whenever I am creating my objects and I'm naming the controls, which will also name the fields. Hey, keep in mind the limitations, right? No more than 64 characters max. No special characters, letters and numbers. Okay, you can also do underscores, I think, and dashes, but other than that, it's letters and numbers. Don't get all IT developery whenever you're naming fields. If it's somebody's first name, just call it first name. Just use simple, logical names. First of all, there's an accessibility reason for it. The WCAG AA standard requires that you use logical, comprehensible names for accessible form fields. So it's not just a good idea, it's the law. So keep that in mind. Second of all, it's just super confusing if you're going through and trying and doing some sort of weird naming convention like that. We're not writing C# code here. You don't need to do that. Just use simple names for your form fields. Names that if when your user sees them, they're going to understand what that form field does. First name. I wonder what sort of data would go into a form field named first name. You're not going to need Sherlock Holmes and Watson to come by and help you figure that out. So, simple names, always good. When possible, use the section control to drop form fields into, to split up your forms and to provide sort of the outer level of layout for your forms. Section controls are super useful. Not only do they provide this sort of layout for your form, and then you can use a table if necessary or what have you inside the section. But the other purpose sections serve is to give you the ability to take entire sections of your form, which is why they're called sections, I guess, and to be able to show and hide them or enable or disable them as we talked about last week. So use sections liberally on your form. Irrespective of what your form is or how long it is, don't forget to do two things. Don't forget to, right below your last form field, wherever it may be, actually, don't forget three things. Don't forget to drop in a signature comments control. Give your approvers the ability to comment. It's super useful. As we talked about last week, they control their own visibility. All you have to do is just throw in the text that you want to appear when the control is displayed on the screen. The control will automatically display on the screen when it's supposed to. So drop a signature comments control there on the form to allow your approvers to make whatever comments they feel necessary. And of course, there may be times when you might want to require a signature comments control, usually if somebody is going to disapprove. In fact, from a form design perspective, that's also a best practice. If I am going to say, no, you can't have your vacation, or no, you can't swap jobs, or whatever I'm saying no to, people don't need an explanation for why you said yes. They don't care why you said yes. They only care that you did say yes. But if you're going to say no, or an approver is going to say no, you're going to want to know why the approver said no. So in general, if you have an approval process that any approver can decline, then you're going to need a signature comments control, because you're going to want to make signature comments mandatory for denying a request, because somebody needs to provide the appropriate explanation for why that request is not being denied. If you're going to approve it, who cares? You approve it. I'm happy. You're apparently happy. That's all that matters. But if you're going to deny it, you're going to make someone unhappy. So just sheer human courtesy requires that you provide an answer as to why you're denying it. But for auditing purposes and for HR purposes and so forth, it might legally be a good idea to collect that comment whenever they're denying a request. So that should be the last form field on your form. And below the last form field, you are always going to want to drop in a button area control, because you want to control where that button area control displays for the user. Now, you can have multiple button area controls. You can display a button area control at the top and the bottom of a form. You can go wild with throwing button area controls on if that's your bag, man. But you do need to have it right below your last form field. Now, when I say below your last form field, the one form field I am not talking about is the routing slip control, because you are going to want to have your button area above the routing slip, but below the signature comments control or whatever else is the last control on your page. This is just a convenience thing for your users and a quality of life issue where, especially if you have a long process and I have to approve this form. So I've got all these data up at the top. I got to review that. And I'm the 30th person to look at it, which means I've got this huge routing slip. What I really am wanting to get to is that set O buttons right there to click them and make magic happen. If I do not put the button area control in this location above the routing slip, then in order to click my button, you're going to force me to scroll past this entire routing slip to get to the buttons at the very bottom of the form, because that's what Process Director is going to do. If you don't drop a button area control on the form, Process Director is going to put one on there for you, and it's going to put it on the very bottom. And if you have if you have any routing slip, I've noticed it's just irksome to have to scroll past that routing slip. Even if it's not that long, it may only, be, 5 inches, 10 centimeters, whatever your preferred measurement is, from the last form field. But I've got to scroll that 5 inches / 10 centimeters to get to the button that I want to click, and it irks me. And if it irks me on a routing slip, even of this size, then it's super going to irk me if I have a long routing slip. So form structure basically should be section control for layout. At the very bottom, signature comments control, then a button area, then the routing slip. That should be your routine form structure on the form. Now, at the top of the form, and you don't even have to display them, they can be hidden. You are going to want to have your 3 fields that we put on every form, which is submitter, submission date, and request number, some sort of generally sequence number created request number that is unique to each request. That way I've got a unique request number. I can search for it to pull up just a single number. So if it is, purchase request number or purchase request 96-0086, I'm going to pull exactly the purchase request I want. But I can also pull all the purchase requests that were submitted on a specific date or in a date range. And I can find all the purchase requests or whatever it may be submitted by a specified user. It's going to give me a lot of flexibility to my knowledge use, a lot of flexibility to searching. So the things to keep in mind for forms are submitter, submission date, and request number, however you generate that. then sections for putting all this data in some sort of logical order on the page, signature comments, button area, routing slip. That is the gold standard for form design. It's 11:40. We really have to move on. I don't think I have much more though to talk about in forms, so we'll go ahead and leave that. I don't even know why I'm saving this form. I'm going to delete it off my system, but now that I've hit the save button, I guess we're going to have to wait for a second. I can have some coffee. Never mind. Process timelines. First of all, see that right there where it says workflow definition? That's going to disappear from the menu by default. We're not going to get rid of the workflow object in the sense that we're not going to delete it from Process Director. It'll still be there. If you have workflows, they're still going to work just the way they always have. And the way that they have always worked has not changed since Process Director version 4.5, because that's when we deprecated them and stopped adding any new functionality to workflows at all. Workflows are basically frozen in the state that they were in 2015, 2016. Occasionally we find a bug and we fix a bug in workflows, but workflows have been untouched for a decade. So this menu item is going to go away. Now, it's going to go away by default. There will be a custom variable that you can set to make it come back so that you can see workflow definition. But you shouldn't be using workflows. And, like I said, we stopped updating workflows in version 4.5. We've announced it. I've talked about it for a decade now, and people are still using workflows. You don't want to be using workflows. We're going to support them for as long as technically possible, but we're going to get into a situation on workflows that we got into with the Word Form Builder, where I like the Word Form Builder. I'm going to continue to use the Word Form Builder for as long as the sun burns hot and space. And then Microsoft says, oh yeah? And they send ActiveX and Internet Explorer and the ability to create those kind of Microsoft Word plugins that we were using to build forms back in the good old days. That all just died. Microsoft killed it. And people were left with a ton now of these legacy forms that they can no longer edit. And by the way, I still get tech support things from saying, hey, we have this Word form and I can't edit it in Word any longer. And the only response I can really give to that is you're correct. You cannot edit them in Word because Microsoft has made it impossible. Your workflows are going to most likely going to go the same way. They're just going to be insupportable at some point. So you shouldn't be using them. And we're going to be removing them from the menu so that you just won't see them presented anymore. That's an aside, but it's happening. So you should be aware of that. So what we do use is the process timeline. I don't have as much to say about process timelines. And the reason is because, well, the use case for process timelines is so wide ranging. It's hard to come up with things that are universally applicable, but there are a couple. And one of the major things is the use of the looping segment. So let us set this to a parent so that we can see the looping tab. You need to create looping segments for all of your approval processes. It's just going to make things a lot easier for you to use looping. Before we introduced looping back in version 4 point whatever, it was a little tedious to have to try to work out loops in the process timeline. You basically had to use a branch activity and you had to, do a rollback to the previous activity. And even that wasn't ideal. Generally, you had to do a jump to a previous activity so that it just jumped back there. No, I think it was, well, whatever it was. I don't remember because it's been so long since I've had to use a branch activity to try to control a loop because looping exists and it's super easy. I really only have to set two properties in most cases. And a lot of cases, I don't even need to set one. In a lot of cases, I only need to set one property, which is when do I want to get out of this loop? And it's if somebody says deny. So I can put my entire approval loop inside a looping segment, parent activity. I can create them all as child activities. And if somebody ever says deny, I can cancel out of the loop. I don't have to go to every activity and put in a needed when if the previous activity result is not deny, then do the. I don't have to mess with any of that. My life becomes so much easier if I use loops for approvals. So once I have my loop, I can then just create however many child activities I need to create to cover whatever my approval scenario is. And I can go ahead and make them all dependent inside that parent loop, that the looping conditions to either restart the loop, but certainly to cancel the remainder of the loop. If I ever want to do a restart of the loop, if I ever want to do an initiate or resubmittal or whatever, I can do that simply by jumping back to the top of the loop and creating a condition where any child activity result is resubmit. But now I've got full control over this loop. If I have to go back and do a resubmittal and restart the loop, I can do that. If somebody says deny, I can exit the loop immediately and go straight to the final disposition notification. The loop makes your life easier. So use loops whenever you can. The other thing about the parent activity is that the loop, super useful, and you do want to use that. However, I don't actually have to use a loop. I can simply use the parent activity as an organizational object in my process timeline. So I can just say, okay, well, I've got this little IT is going to do one thing and HR is going to do another thing. Well, I can have a little section, a little folder essentially, where I can just set all of my HR activities, and in the other folder, I can set all of my IT activities, and I can, arrange their dependencies separately. So the parent activity is super useful in two ways. First, as a method of organization, and second, the ability to control looping in a process timeline. So you should probably avail yourselves of parent activities a lot more. Now, I did mention a final disposition notification. So two things. Now that I have a parent activity, when I want to set up dependencies, what I generally don't want to do is make activity 2 here dependent on activity 1.3. Instead, if I'm going to set the dependency for this activity, I'm going to want to take a subsequent activity and I'm going to want to make it dependent on my parent activity. So I don't really care in terms of the structure of my timeline what goes on in child activities, and the only dependencies I need to worry about are the dependencies between the child activities inside of activity 1. Outside of the parent activity, I want to make all of my dependencies point to the parent activity, not to any of its children. Now, I do see this a lot where people are trying to, they'll set up a parent activity and then they'll make activity two dependent on activity 1.3, and it works for them. Technically, in that particular case, there would be, well, in this particular case, there would be nothing wrong with that. I would have the same effectively critical path as I did before in terms of what the user perceives. But in reality, when you use parent activities, which you should, then make the other activities dependent on the parent activities. Same thing if I have two parent activities in a process timeline. So we'll make this a parent, and we'll just create a couple of child activities for it. Okay, so oh, well, I didn't make a child activity of it. So now I've got to make that a child activity. Okay, so I've got this activity here, and I'm going to bring it way up here, and I'm going to put in some dependencies on my child activities. What I would do when I was determining when activity one should start, if I want it to start after all of this stuff in activity three and its children completes, similarly, I am going to want to set my depends on the parent activity itself. So in a timeline, whenever you're creating dependencies, when you're using these parent activities, whether you're using them as loops or whether you're just using them as organizational folders on the process timeline, the parent activity should be your first choice for setting up dependencies, not your child activities. Now, I mentioned final disposition activity. This is the third time I've mentioned it, and we're going to address it now. So, final disposition. Irrespective of what happens in the process, whether it gets approved or whether it gets disapproved, I am going to want to have a notify activity that notifies my end user that something has happened, that the processing of their request has been finished. So I am going to want to have a final disposition notification, and I am just going to want to, when the activity starts, notify the timeline initiator in most cases that what the final disposition is. Obviously, I'm going to need an email template for that. I'm going to need to be able to provide the appropriate information, who approved it, who denied it, what their comments were, all of that other good stuff. I'm going to want to have all that, but you should always have a final disposition notification whenever the process ends so that the initiator understands what happened during the course of the process and what the final judgment on it was. Final thing on process timeline, and since it's 11:52, I guess our final thing today. We are just about best practiced out. I often see at the very end of a process timeline the end process activity. I see it on a lot of customer sites where I go in and I look, and the very last activity is the end process activity. I probably should have called it end process, should have changed the name. And I'm retyping activity 4. Actually, I started typing E for end process, and somehow I started typing activity. So my brain must be fried. But I see this a lot, end process, as the very last thing going on in the process timeline. That is the most unnecessary thing that you could possibly do when creating a process timeline. Whenever this final disposition notification completes, this process timeline is going to end. It's going to mark itself as complete. All of the activities have been done. They have all been completed. Thus, the process timeline is completed. Process timelines end themselves at the appropriate time. That is not, so this end process here is unnecessary. Now, the purpose of the end process is actually to end the process before its natural lifespan would end, usually because something untoward has occurred and it wants to end the process. So a use case for that, let me move it up here, and then let me drag it under here. I now have a circular dependency. Well, I certainly don't want to have a circular dependency. So let me remove that dependence. And we will make this dependent on, actually, I don't know what we're going to make it dependent on. I guess we're going to make it dependent on activity 4. So there we go. Now it no longer has circular dependencies. So in this case, I have the end process stuck here in the middle. This is where you should be placing your end process stuff, not at the end, because that's not its purpose. Our job with the end process is to end the timeline, usually because some condition applies that short circuits everything else that's supposed to happen in the timeline. So I might put an end process here where if this activity fires and it runs through this sequence, I want to end the activity right there. I only want these 2 activities to run, then I'm done. I don't need to run any of this stuff, so I'm going to end the timeline way up here. Now, if this doesn't run, then I'm just going to skip all of this stuff, and I'm going to go straight here to this activity, and then that activity will invoke these 3 sub-activities, and then I will ultimately have my final disposition sent out to the end user. So use the end process activity type wisely, and don't stick it at the very end of a process timeline. It doesn't actually do anything when you do that, because the timeline is going to end itself at the appropriate time whenever all the activities complete anyway. So the end process is a special thing where I am going to end the process timeline early. It is not used to just end the process timeline when it reaches the natural end of its life. Well, I had some doubts as to whether I could talk for a full 2 hours on this topic. And as it turns out, I could talk for longer, but will not. I will allow you to return to your lives, and I will cease interfering in them anymore today. Have a great week. We will look forward to talking to you again next week. So long.